Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step out of this seat. First class isn't open to upgrades today. The voice was polite on the surface, but carried a cold edge beneath. The flight attendant, her nameplate read, Karen Mitchell, stood with her hands folded, waiting for compliance. The man she spoke to didn't move. He simply looked up, calm and composed, his dark eyes steady. On his boarding pass, printed in bold, was Seat 1B, First Class, yet somehow, that wasn't enough. "Ma'am," he said softly, "this is my assigned seat." Karen tilted her head, skeptical. "I understand, sir, but I'll need to verify your ticket." Her tone had the finality of someone convinced they were right. "Before we continue, take a moment. Tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. Because this story, what happened next on that plane, shocked the entire airline industry and changed everything." Nathan Carter sat still. His calmness wasn't weakness. It was control. Years of experience had taught him that silence often spoke louder than outrage. He wore a tailored navy suit, a silver watch that gleamed faintly under the cabin light, and a quiet dignity that made him stand out. But to Karen, that was the problem. Something about him didn't fit the picture in her mind of what a first-class passenger should look like. Nathan was no ordinary traveler. He was Dr. Nathan Carter, a black CEO and one of Delta's own board members, a former aerospace engineer turned executive. He had built his career fighting for fairness within a system that often overlooked people like him. Today, he was flying anonymously, testing how his own company treated passengers when no one knew who they were. He wanted to see progress. What he found instead was a painful reminder that bias still lived quietly in places people refused to see. "Sir, may I see your ID?" Karen pressed, now drawing glances from nearby passengers. Nathan handed over his boarding pass and an American Express black card. Calm as ever. "That should be more than enough," he said gently. Karen's lips tightened. "I'll have to speak with the captain." She turned and walked briskly toward the cockpit. Nathan exhaled slowly. His phone buzzed. Mission started. Record everything. Read a text from his legal team. This was supposed to be a quiet internal test, not a public scene, but sometimes truth didn't wait for comfort. 2 rows back, a young woman with caramel skin and sharp eyes adjusted her phone camera. Sophia Alvarez, a travel influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers, whispered to her friend, "You seeing this? That guy's being questioned over his seat." She started a live stream. "Guys, something's going down right now on Delta Flight 1923, she said softly. Within minutes, 12,000 people were watching. Captain Ryan Sullivan emerged from the cockpit. He was tall, experienced, the kind of man used to being in control. "What's going on?" "Karen?" he asked, though his glance at Nathan already carried suspicion. Karen explained her concern about the passenger in 1B. Ryan nodded slightly and turned to Nathan. "Sir, we've had issues with fraudulent boarding passes lately, just trying to verify everything." Nathan's voice remained steady. "I understand, Captain, but my name is on your manifest. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Ryan didn't look at the manifest. He looked at Nathan's face. "I just need to be sure," he said, and in those words, something heavy lingered. From the back, Sophia's phone captured every second. Comments flooded in. "Why are they checking him? He already showed his card. This feels wrong." The number of viewers climbed. 15,000, 20, 30. A storm was brewing in real time, and no one inside that cabin knew just how far it would reach. Nathan's patience began to thin, but his voice remained calm. "Captain," he said, "I'm familiar with FAA regulations. You can't remove a passenger without cause. I've provided documentation, unless there's something else. I'd like to remain in my seat." Ryan hesitated. Karen shifted uncomfortably. Sir, she said again, please cooperate. Nathan looked up, his tone measured but firm. You're about to make a mistake that will follow you for a long time. He unlocked his phone and made a call. The ring lasted only a second. Then a man's voice answered. Ed Bastian speaking. Sophia nearly dropped her phone. Wait, did he just call Delta's CEO? She whispered to her live stream. Comments exploded. What? The CEO? This is about to blow up. Nathan's words were calm, deliberate. Ed, it's Nathan Carter. I'm on flight 1923, seat 1B. Your crew just questioned my right to sit here. Silence filled the cabin as the captain's eyes widened. Over the phone came Ed's sharp reply. You're on that flight? Nathan nodded. Then stay put. I'll handle it. Karen's face turned pale. Ryan's hand dropped from his belt, his authority suddenly hollow. The cabin was quiet except for the faint hum of engines outside. Sophia whispered into her mic. This man is one of their own executives. I think they just profiled the wrong person. Her live stream passed 50,000 viewers. Karen tried to recover. Sir, I didn't mean... Nathan interrupted softly. You meant exactly what you did. Ma'am, you followed what you believed was procedure. But what you really followed was bias. He didn't raise his voice. Yet every syllable carried weight. And that's why I'm here today. To see if anything has changed. Ryan's eyes flickered with recognition. He remembered this man now. 3 years ago at a leadership summit, speaking about diversity and equality in aviation, he'd shaken Nathan's hand back then. Now, shame burned in his chest. Passengers whispered, glancing between them. Phones were up. Sophia's stream hit 75,000 live viewers. Outside. The gate agent announced a short delay. Flight 1923 departure postponed for operational reasons. Inside. Silence pressed against every wall. Nathan ended the call and folded his hands. Captain, he said quietly, you and I will have a serious discussion about what just happened, not as passengers and crew, but as men accountable to truth. Ryan didn't speak. Karen lowered her eyes. Exactly 15 minutes had passed since Karen's first words. 15 minutes of doubt, humiliation, and revelation in that brief span. Reputations began to crack. A live stream began to burn across social media, and Delta Airlines stood on the edge of a storm that would test its very core. The engine still hummed. But inside that plane, a different kind of power had begun to rise. The kind that doesn't come from machines or money, but from justice waiting too long to be heard. When Captain Ryan Sullivan stepped back from seat 1B, the silence in the cabin grew thick enough to cut. Passengers whispered in hushed tones, phones tilted upward, recording what felt like the longest pause before takeoff. Karen stood near the galley, pretending to check her tablet, her face pale. She had no idea that her every gesture, her every glance, was being streamed live to tens of thousands of people in the front row. Nathan Carter sat perfectly still, his hands folded, his phone still open on the tray table. On the screen. Ed Bastian's message glowed faintly. Stay calm. We're handling it. But the damage was already unfolding before their eyes. Sophia Alvarez adjusted her phone, lowering her voice to her audience. This isn't just about one man being questioned, she whispered. This is about what people still believe when they look at someone who doesn't fit their picture of success. Her followers flooded the chat. That's bias. This is unbelievable. Keep filming. Within minutes, the live stream reached 50,000 viewers. Ryan turned to Karen, lowering his voice. We'll just say it was a misunderstanding, he muttered. But Nathan heard him. A misunderstanding. Nathan repeated quietly. Is when you forget a drink order? What happened here is a decision, made on site, without evidence. Ryan turned sharply, trying to regain control. Sir, This isn't personal. We follow procedure. Nathan looked him straight in the eye. Then your procedure needs to change? The air was heavy, filled with something unspoken. Karen looked at Nathan, her lips parting as if to apologize, but she stopped herself, in her mind. She replayed the moment she first saw him, the quick judgment, the flicker of suspicion she hadn't even questioned. It wasn't hatred, it was habit, the quiet kind of bias that hides behind rules and checklists. Nathan leaned slightly toward the aisle. "Karen," he said gently, "when was the last time you asked a white passenger in first class to show ID?" Her face went blank. I was just following security protocol, which doesn't exist for seat verification," he replied calmly. "You made a call, and you made it based on who you thought I was." Ryan straightened. "Enough," he said firmly. "You're disrupting the cabin." Nathan didn't flinch. "No, Captain. I'm exposing the system." He spoke softly, but the entire cabin heard. A few passengers nodded silently. One woman in seat 2A whispered, "He's right." Just then, Sophia's phone chimed. She looked down and gasped. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Someone just sent me Delta's internal complaint records." Her followers exploded with comments. She scrolled quickly, reading aloud. 78 racial discrimination complaints this quarter alone. 78. The number echoed through the cabin like thunder. Karen's knees weakened. Ryan's face drained of color. Nathan turned his head slowly toward Sophia. "Would you send that to me, please?" She nodded. "Already done." Nathan opened the document on his phone, scanning the list. It wasn't just numbers. It was names, roots, stories. He looked up. "This isn't new," he said quietly. "This is what happens when people refuse to see what's in front of them." Ryan exhaled, trying to reassert control. "Dr. Carter," he said, "you're escalating a private matter into a public one." Nathan's gaze was unwavering. "Captain, when bias becomes policy, it stops being private," Sophia whispered into her live stream. "He's calling them out in real time." Her followers were now over 100,000 strong. Screens across the country were filled with the live feed from seat 1B. The hashtag Delta Bias climbed to the top of trending charts. Karen's voice cracked. "I didn't mean to disrespect you, sir. I just thought that I didn't belong here." Nathan finished softly. "You're not the first person to think that. You just said it out loud." A flight attendant from economy peeked through the curtain, sensing the tension. Ryan waved him away. He was sweating now, inside. Panic was building. He remembered something from 3 years ago, a company seminar on unconscious bias. He'd been there. Nathan had been the keynote speaker. He had stood on that stage, talking about invisible prejudice, and Ryan had clapped like everyone else. And now, here he was, standing on the wrong side of that very lesson. Nathan's phone buzzed again. It was Delta's legal department, Dr. Carter. "Ed wants a live update." He tapped a button, and within seconds, the CEO's face appeared on the screen. The cabin froze. Passengers leaned in, pretending not to watch. "Nathan," Ed said, his voice steady but concerned. "We're receiving live reports. Are you safe?" Nathan's tone was calm. "Physically. Yes, but your company's reputation isn't..." Ryan took a step back. Karen covered her mouth, eyes wet. "Ed," Nathan continued, "your employees just questioned one of your own executives for sitting in the seat he paid for, in front of witnesses, and it's being streamed to over 100,000 people." Ed closed his eyes for a moment. "What's the crew's status?" Nathan glanced up, still on duty. For now. Ed's voice hardened. Not anymore. He turned his attention to Ryan and Karen. "This is Ed Bastian, CEO of Delta Airlines. You are both relieved of duty effective immediately. Please cooperate with airport security when we land." The line went silent. Karen's legs gave out. She grabbed the seat beside her for balance. Ryan's jaw tightened. But he didn't argue. For a man who had flown thousands of hours, this was the first time he felt truly grounded. Sophia whispered into her camera. They just got fired, right here, in the air. The live stream chat exploded. Justice served! Unbelievable! This man is incredible! Nathan turned his attention back to Karen. You could have asked a question with kindness, he said softly. Instead, you made an assumption with consequence. She looked at him through tears. I have a son, she whispered. I can't lose this job. Nathan's voice lowered, filled with quiet empathy. Then learn from this moment, so he won't grow up repeating it. For the first time, she saw not an angry passenger, but a man who understood pain deeper than humiliation, someone who'd carried it for years and turned it into purpose. The intercom crackled. Ryan's co-pilot announced a delay in departure. Ladies and gentlemen, we're holding for operational review. We appreciate your patience, but patience was gone. Truth had taken its place. Sophia's live stream hit 150,000 viewers. Screenshots were spreading, media accounts were tagging Delta, and within minutes, national outlets were calling it the flight that exposed the skies. Nathan leaned back, exhausted but composed. He knew what this meant. Lawsuits, press conferences, internal investigations, but he also knew it was necessary, because until someone stood up in that cabin, bias would keep flying under the radar. He looked toward the cockpit, his voice calm but resolute. Captain, I didn't come here to destroy anyone. I came here to see if the culture we built had truly changed. Now I have my answer. Ryan couldn't respond. He simply stared ahead, hearing his own silence echo louder than any defense he could offer. As the engines began to power down and the crew gathered their composure, one truth became undeniable. It wasn't turbulence that delayed Flight 1923. It was accountability. And in that moment, every person on board realized that sometimes the hardest flight to control is the one inside yourself. The sound of the intercom clicking off was the last quiet thing that happened on Flight 1923 within minutes. What had begun as a tense confrontation turned into a global spectacle. Sofia Alvarez's live stream, once a small audience of curious travelers, had exploded to 150,000 viewers and was still climbing. The chat window scrolled so fast she could barely read the comments. Reporters, influencers, and even airline staff watching from other flights began sharing clips. Hashtags multiplied, screenshots of Nathan Carter's calm, steady face-filled social media feeds with captions like, "Dignity under pressure." Delta Airlines' public relations department hadn't even issued a statement yet, but the world had already chosen a side, inside the cabin. Nathan remained seated, quiet but alert. He knew what was happening beyond that aircraft's walls. His phone buzzed again. Emails, calls, notifications piling up. But he ignored them. He was focused on the two people standing before him, Karen Mitchell, trembling near the galley with a blank stare, and Captain Ryan Sullivan, still gripping his tablet as if it could hold together what was already falling apart. "Captain," Nathan said calmly, "you may want to prepare your crew. This video isn't going away." Ryan's eyes flickered toward Sophia, who kept filming despite the warning glances from other attendants. He wanted to order her to stop, but he couldn't. Every decision he made now was being recorded, analyzed, and broadcast in real time. His authority had evaporated into digital air. "Miss," he said stiffly, "please respect passenger privacy." Sophia didn't even look up. "Captain," she replied evenly, "respect is earned, and right now, the only privacy being violated is his." Karen looked down, tears starting to fall. Her chest rose and fell quickly as if she were running out of air. "I didn't mean harm," she whispered. "I just reacted." Nathan turned toward her slowly. "That's how bias works," he said quietly. "It doesn't announce itself. It just reacts." His voice was calm, but it carried through the entire cabin. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably, realizing how silent they had been during it all. At that moment, Nathan's phone rang again, this time a video call request. On the screen appeared the faces of Delta CEO Ed Bastian and Linda Harris, Senior VP of Operations. Their expressions were tense. "Nathan," Ed said, his voice low but sharp, "we're seeing everything. It's everywhere. Twitter, CNN, even BBC. We've got a crisis on our hands." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Correction. Ed, you have a crisis. I'm living the reason for it. The cabin was dead quiet. Everyone, even Karen, listened. We're initiating an immediate review." Ed continued. "The crew will be suspended pending investigation." Linda's tone was softer. "Nathan, are you okay?" "I'm fine," he said. "But this flight isn't... You have a cultural problem, not a PR one. Fixing it will take more than a statement." Karen took a step forward, trembling. "Please," she said, voice cracking, "don't ruin my life over one mistake." Nathan met her eyes, and for a moment his expression softened. "Karen, I don't want to ruin your life. I want you to see it." She didn't understand. See what? The truth. That a uniform doesn't make you right, and a title doesn't make me wrong. Sophia lowered her phone briefly, wiping a tear. For all her activism, she hadn't expected to witness a moment like this. Real, raw, unedited. "He's teaching while being humiliated," she whispered to her audience. The comment section erupted with empathy and anger. People began tagging civil rights organizations, demanding accountability. Ryan stood motionless. His composure was slipping. Every headline forming in his head began with his name. Captain Ryan Sullivan faces investigation. He had spent 18 years building a spotless record, and in less than 15 minutes, it was unraveling. His mind flashed back to that diversity workshop years ago, the one Nathan led. He had nodded, smiled, taken notes, but never really listened. And now, those lessons had come back like judgment itself. Nathan broke the silence. "Captain, I have a question," he said. "In your years of service, how many passengers of color have you questioned about their seat assignments?" Ryan didn't answer. Nathan waited. "You know the number, don't you?" Ryan swallowed hard. 14, he whispered finally. Nathan nodded slowly. 14 that you remember? And none of them ever sat in first class again after your verification? Did they? Ryan's shoulders dropped. "No," he admitted quietly. Sophia caught that on camera. The chat exploded again. "He said 14! Unbelievable! This is systemic!" The truth was no longer contained in the plane. It had entered every phone, every conversation, every conscience watching. Karen collapsed into her seat near the exit, sobbing. "I didn't want this," she whispered. Nathan turned toward her gently. "Neither did I. But if we don't face it, it will keep happening, to the next person, and the next after that." Ed's voice came through the phone again. "Nathan, we're grounding the aircraft once it lands. FAA compliance team is being notified. You'll have full authority to oversee the internal review." Nathan didn't blink. "Then start by grounding the people who let this culture grow unchecked." Ryan's jaw tightened. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Nathan turned, his expression pained. "Enjoying it? Captain, I've spent a lifetime proving I belong in rooms that should have welcomed me without question. There's no joy in this, only exhaustion." The cabin fell silent again. Outside the window, the sun cast a pale glow over the tarmac. But inside, no one saw it. They were watching something far brighter. Truth, burning through denial. Sophia adjusted her phone and spoke quietly to her audience. "You're witnessing history," she said. "This isn't just one flight. This is a mirror of everything people of color face every day. In boardrooms, airports, everywhere. The viewer count passed 200,000. A passenger across the aisle, a middle-aged woman in a business suit, finally spoke up. "Dr. Carter," she said softly, "thank you for staying calm. I'm ashamed I didn't speak sooner." Nathan gave a small nod. "It's not about shame," he said. "It's about courage. Courage to see, then, without warning." Karen stood, trembling but determined. "I'm sorry," she said, voice shaking. "To you, and to anyone who's ever been treated the way I treated you. I thought I was following rules, but really, I was protecting comfort. My own comfort." Nathan nodded once. "That's the first honest thing you've said today, and I respect it." Ryan looked away, unable to face them. His phone buzzed, FAA requesting contact upon landing. He knew what that meant. The end of his license, maybe his career. But for the first time, he didn't try to defend himself. Sophia whispered into her camera again. "You can feel it. Something just changed." Her followers agreed. The comments were full of hearts, fists, and words of support. Nathan leaned back and looked at the screen still showing Ed and Linda. "If Delta wants to rebuild trust," he said quietly, "it starts here, with accountability, not apologies." Ed nodded. "Understood. We'll issue a formal statement once you land. And Nathan, thank you for holding us accountable, even when it hurt." The call ended. Nathan set his phone aside and exhaled deeply. He wasn't angry anymore. Just tired. Tired of repeating the same lesson to a world that still struggled to listen. Sophia zoomed in on his face, capturing that mix of pain and resolve. "He's not just a passenger," she whispered to her audience. "He's a leader." As the plane finally taxied for departure, the tension hung heavy, but different now, like the air after a storm. The flight attendants avoided eye contact. Ryan stared straight ahead, lost in thought, and Nathan closed his eyes, whispering to himself words that no one heard but everyone felt. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes. It whispers through courage. The engines began to hum again, the wheels rolled forward, and as the aircraft lifted slowly into the sky, the world below was already watching, already changing, because one man refused to stand when the world told him he didn't belong sitting. The engines finally roared, and Flight 1923 lifted from the tarmac with a heavy, uneasy silence. The passengers sat still, their eyes darting between their screens and the cabin crew who now avoided eye contact altogether. The altitude climbed, but so did the tension. Nathan Carter sat motionless, his seat upright, hands clasped, the calm in his eyes hiding a storm that only experience could contain. To him, every vibration of the aircraft was a reminder. Justice may move slowly, but it always moves. Beside him. Sophia Alvarez's phone continued to stream. The numbers kept climbing. 200,000, then 300, then 4. The entire nation was now watching a flight that hadn't even reached cruising altitude. Captain Ryan Sullivan sat in the cockpit, staring blankly at the clouds ahead. His first officer flew in silence, afraid to speak. The cockpit felt smaller than it ever had before. Ryan's mind raced with the weight of what had happened. His reputation, his license, his career, all unraveling in real time. He had made hundreds of decisions under pressure, but none like this. His phone on the dash kept buzzing with alerts, emails, messages, and a short text from his wife. "Ryan, what did you do?" That one line hit harder than any turbulence. Back in the cabin. Karen Mitchell sat in the jump seat near the galley, staring down at her trembling hands. The uniform that once gave her pride now felt like a burden. She remembered Nathan's words. "You made a call based on who you thought I was." Those words cut through her chest. The truth hurt because it was real, for the first time. She saw herself not as a victim of stress or misunderstanding, but as part of a system built on quiet, polite exclusion. Nathan turned slightly toward Sophia. "How bad is it out there?" he asked quietly. She tilted the phone toward him. "Every news outlet has picked it up," she said. "You're on every platform. People are angry, inspired, divided. It's chaos." Nathan nodded slowly. "Good," he said softly. Truth should be uncomfortable. He opened his laptop and typed rapidly. Connecting to Delta's internal network through an encrypted channel, a file appeared. Internal analytics from the company's complaint division. He scanned the data, his eyes narrowing. 1,600 incidents of racial bias or profiling within the last 2 years. He murmured, "Unreported, unresolved." Sophia's jaw dropped. "That's almost $1 billion in potential lawsuits," she whispered. Nathan nodded grimly. 960 million, to be exact, and this flight just became the proof. From the cockpit, Ryan's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're cruising at 35,000 feet. Please remain seated and expect updates upon arrival." His voice was steady, but behind that steadiness was a crack, one that every passenger could feel. A few minutes later, the flight phone beside Nathan rang. He answered quietly. "Nathan Carter," he said. On the other end was an FAA investigator, David Ruiz, Dr. Carter. "I'm calling on behalf of the Federal Aviation Administration. We've been briefed by Delta Corporate and are opening an inquiry into Flight 1923. We'll need your statement when you land," Nathan replied calmly. "You'll have it, and every recording, message, and timestamp to support it." Sophia leaned closer. "This isn't just a scandal anymore," she said. "It's a turning point." Nathan gave a faint nod. "If we do this right, no one will have to prove they belong in their own seat again." Then, something unexpected happened. The cockpit door opened slightly, and Ryan stepped out. His face was pale, his voice low. "Dr. Carter," he said, almost hesitant. "May I speak with you privately?" The entire cabin froze. Nathan stood, motioning for him to step aside. They walked toward the galley, away from the cameras. Ryan leaned on the wall, his voice trembling. "My wife called. He said, she's Asian. She saw the video before I could explain. She said she doesn't even recognize the man I've become." Nathan's expression softened, though his tone stayed firm. "You let fear guide you. Captain, fear of perception, fear of loss, fear of confronting what's wrong in the system you protect." Ryan looked down. "I thought being careful made me fair." Nathan shook his head. "It made you blind." Ryan's breathing grew shallow. "I never meant to humiliate you," he said quietly. Nathan paused before responding. "Intention doesn't erase impact." The captain looked ready to break. "So, what happens to me now?" Nathan met his gaze. "That depends on whether you learn, or just regret." Karen listened from a few feet away, tears streaking her face. "Dr. Carter," she whispered, "I can't sleep knowing what I did. I have a son, 8 years old. He's biracial. I tell him to be proud of who he is. And yet, I judged you." Nathan turned toward her, voice softer now. "Then show him what accountability looks like. Not by hiding, but by speaking. Tell the truth. Karen, out loud. That's where change begins." Sophia had stopped filming, sensing that some moments weren't for the world, but for the heart. She looked around at the passengers, many of them now reflecting quietly. A woman whispered, "I've flown 100 times and never noticed how often this happens." Another man nodded. "We just look away." Nathan returned to his seat, his phone buzzing with non-stop updates. Delta's stock had dropped $5 a share within the hour. Over $1.5 billion in market value gone. He didn't celebrate. Numbers didn't matter as much as the shift he felt in the air. Truth was finally flying higher than reputation. Sophia's phone buzzed again. An update from her platform. "You've hit 500,000 live viewers," she said in disbelief. "People are outside Delta headquarters protesting already. They're calling it the seat that sparked the sky." Nathan gave a tired smile. Good. Maybe this time. People won't forget when the plane lands. Ryan returned to the cockpit. Silent. While Karen sat motionless, clutching a tissue. The hum of the engines filled the space between guilt and growth. Hours later. As the aircraft began its descent toward Los Angeles, Nathan received another call, this time from the Department of Justice. "Dr. Carter," the voice said, "we're coordinating with the FAA. Expect formal hearings on discriminatory practices in commercial aviation. We'd like your leadership on the reform panel." Nathan closed his eyes. "I'll be there," he said simply. Sophia's live stream resumed as the city lights appeared below. She spoke softly to her audience. "You've watched prejudice get confronted and accountability begin, all from 35,000 feet. But remember, change doesn't start on the ground. It starts when someone refuses to sit down." Nathan looked out the window, the reflection of the city shining back at him like a promise. He turned to Sophia and said quietly, "This wasn't just a flight. It was a mirror. And now, the world has to decide whether to look away or to change." As Flight 1923 touched down, applause broke from the back rows, not out of celebration, but relief. Karen wiped her tears. Ryan's hands shook on the controls. Nathan didn't move. He simply whispered to himself. One truth told in the air can change what happens on the ground. And for the first time, in that thin cabin air, the truth finally felt like it had enough room to breathe. When Flight 1923's wheels touched down at Los Angeles International Airport, the tension inside the cabin was unbearable. The landing gear screamed against the runway, but even that sharp sound couldn't drown out the silence that followed. Every passenger remained in their seat, afraid to move, as if they were part of something bigger than a flight, something about truth, justice, and accountability. The captain's voice came over the intercom, trembling slightly. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Los Angeles." He hesitated. "We'll be delayed at the gate for a brief review." It was the understatement of the year, because just outside that cabin, chaos was waiting. As the plane taxied toward the terminal, flashing blue and red lights reflected off the fuselage. Law enforcement, airport security, and FAA investigators had already surrounded the gate, in the crowd beyond. Dozens of cameras and news vans lined the edge of Terminal 2. Protesters held signs, "End flight bias," "Justice has landed," and "We fly equal." The video from Sophia's live stream had spread like wildfire across the country. In less than 6 hours, it had surpassed 6 million views by the time the wheels touched down. Delta bias was the #1 trending topic in America. Inside. Karen Mitchell sat frozen, her uniform rumpled, eyes hollow. The proud smile she once carried for representing her airline had been replaced by quiet dread. She could hear the crowd chanting outside through the glass. "They're protesting. Because of me," she whispered. Nathan, sitting nearby, didn't respond. He simply watched her, not with anger, but with the steady calm of someone who'd seen this pattern before. "They're protesting," he said softly, "because they finally saw what so many go through unseen." Sofia Alvarez's phone was still recording, though her tone had changed. There was no more excitement, no shock value, only quiet reflection. "We just landed in Los Angeles. She whispered to her audience. Hundreds of people are outside. The world saw bias unfold in real time. Now, the question is, what happens next? The seatbelt sign blinked off, but no one moved. The cabin door remained closed as airport security boarded. Two officers, Lisa Nguyen and Michael Torres, walked down the aisle calmly. Their body cameras were on, recording every moment. They approached Nathan first. "Dr. Carter," Lisa said respectfully, "we're here to escort you safely off the aircraft. The CEO has requested a formal debrief at the terminal." Nathan nodded, stood up slowly, and grabbed his briefcase. But before he stepped away, he turned toward Karen and Ryan. "Stay seated," he said quietly. "This moment isn't over." Karen looked down, trembling. "Dr. Carter, I've already been suspended. Please, don't make this worse." Nathan shook his head. "You made it worse the moment you forgot to see me as human. But I believe in redemption, if you're willing to earn it." The cameras followed as Nathan stepped out of the cabin. The gate was swarmed, reporters shouting questions, passengers trying to film, security forming a barrier. He walked with quiet authority, his expression unreadable. Outside, the air was thick with noise, protesters chanting, journalists demanding answers. Somewhere in the chaos, a woman's voice called out, "Thank you, Dr. Carter." He turned briefly, gave a polite nod, then disappeared into the restricted area beyond the jet bridge, inside the aircraft. Ryan Sullivan sat motionless in the cockpit, staring at the illuminated controls he might never touch again. His phone buzzed again. This time a message from his attorney, "FAA suspension pending. We'll fight this." But even now, he wasn't thinking about legal battles. He was thinking about his wife, his mixed-race son, and the moment he'd looked at a man who looked different from him and doubted his worth. Shame, deep and suffocating, settled in his chest. Meanwhile, Karen tried to compose herself as Lisa Nguyen approached her. "Ms. Mitchell, you're being placed on administrative leave. Please gather your belongings." Karen's lip quivered. I understand," as she stood. She noticed passengers avoiding her gaze. One woman muttered under her breath, "You brought this on yourself." Another whispered, "This is what accountability looks like." By the time she stepped off the plane, reporters were waiting, microphones extended like arrows. "Karen, do you have anything to say about the incident? Do you regret your actions? Were you aware he was a Delta board member?" Each question hit harder than the last. She covered her face with her hands and pushed through the crowd. Behind her, Ryan exited next, escorted by FAA officials. Cameras flashed. The once respected captain now looked small beneath the fluorescent terminal lights. Outside, the protest was growing. Sofia Alvarez had joined the crowd, live streaming once again. "We're here at LAX," she narrated, her voice filled with conviction. "Hundreds have gathered to demand reform in air travel. Real reform, not corporate slogans. This isn't about one man or one flight. It's about an entire system that needs to see its reflection." Behind her, people chanted Nathan's name, holding signs reading "Courage at 35,000 feet and dignity takes off" inside the airport. Nathan stood with Delta's senior executives, FAA investigators, and 2 DOJ representatives. He placed a folder on the table in front of them. Documentation of years of unreported bias complaints within Delta's internal records. "You've hidden behind policies," he said firmly. "But policies don't fix culture. You need a reform plan, and you need it now." Ed Bastian nodded gravely. "We'll do whatever it takes." Nathan leaned forward. "Then start with accountability. I want every crew member to complete anti-bias training, mandatory, measurable, and transparent, and every plane will be equipped with AI-monitored cabin cameras." The executives exchanged nervous glances. Nathan continued, I'll allocate $20 million from the board's discretionary fund to create the Fair Skies initiative. Delta won't just apologize. We'll lead later that evening, as Karen sat in a small interrogation room with a legal representative. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Her private data, photos, messages, even her home address, had been leaked online. Anonymous users were sending threats. Her hands shook as she dropped the phone. "Please, make it stop," she whispered. FAA Officer Michael Torres looked at her sadly. "The internet can be cruel, but you still have a chance to make this right. Cooperate. Speak honestly. That's how you heal." Ryan's meeting with the FAA went no better. His license was suspended pending a full investigation. He would lose his salary, his reputation, and possibly his marriage. He left the terminal through a side exit, head bowed, past the protesters who shouted his name, not in support, but in outrage. Nathan left the airport hours later, exhausted but composed. His phone vibrated with messages from journalists, activists, and even senators. One from the Department of Justice caught his attention. "We want you to testify in upcoming hearings on systemic bias in commercial aviation." He stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "I'll be there." Outside, Sophia caught up with him. "Dr. Carter," she said breathlessly, "you've started something bigger than anyone expected. The whole country's watching." Nathan paused, then smiled faintly. "Good. Then maybe they'll finally listen." As he walked toward his car, the noise of the crowd faded behind him, replaced by a quieter truth, the kind that doesn't end with a landing. For Karen and Ryan, the fall had only begun. But for Nathan, and for the countless people who had ever been questioned for simply existing where they belonged, something had finally lifted when the cameras shut off and the crowd dispersed. The world didn't just see a viral moment, they saw a reckoning. And as the lights of Los Angeles glimmered through the airport glass, the message was clear. Justice had landed. But its journey had only just begun. A month passed, yet the world still hadn't stopped talking about Flight 1923. News outlets dissected every second of that 15-minute confrontation. Analysts debated it nightly, and social platforms flooded with hashtags demanding reform. But for those who had lived it, Nathan, Karen, Ryan, and Sophia, the consequences had already settled like heavy dust that refused to lift. Delta's official statement had gone out weeks earlier. "We condemn discrimination in all forms and are implementing comprehensive anti-bias initiatives across all operations." It sounded strong, decisive, corporate, but inside the company and across the country, everyone knew the real story wasn't about a press release. It was about people learning what accountability truly costs. Karen Mitchell sat in a tiny apartment she could barely afford on the outskirts of Phoenix, the blinds drawn against the desert sun. Her career as a flight attendant was over. No airline would touch her. Not after the video. The union had offered her mediation, but the public outrage was too great. She had sold her house to cover legal fees and was now fighting for custody of her 8-year-old son, Lucas. She stared at a photo of him on the kitchen counter, his smile bright and innocent. "I was supposed to protect you from the world," she whispered, "not become its warning every day." She checked her email hoping for some miracle, a chance to start again. But what she got were hate messages, people calling her names, accusing her of things far worse than what had happened. She deleted most of them, but the words stayed anyway, across the country in Atlanta. Captain Ryan Sullivan sat in the corner of a therapist's office, staring at the carpet while the clock ticked too loudly. His FAA license was suspended. His wife had taken their son to her parents' home in Seattle, and the career that once defined his identity now existed only in headlines. He looked older, hollowed out. "Do you think people can change?" he asked the therapist quietly. she replied. Only when they stopped trying to justify what broke them. He nodded slowly. I told myself I was protecting safety, but really, I was protecting my comfort. Tears formed in his eyes, and I destroyed everything. He spent hours each week in counseling, part of his mandatory rehabilitation program through Delta's Reform Division. But the hardest work wasn't in the sessions. It was in facing the silence when he came home. Meanwhile, Nathan Carter was busier than ever. His $20 million Fair Skies initiative had launched under national attention. Every major airline executive wanted a seat at his table, not out of moral awakening but fear of being next. Nathan didn't mind. Change born out of fear still changed the system. Delta had installed AI-assisted cabin cameras on 300 planes to monitor crew behavior, body language analytics, and passenger interactions for the first time. Transparency wasn't optional. We can't fix what we refuse to see. Nathan told CNN in a prime-time interview, technology can expose bias, but only humanity can erase it. His calm, deliberate voice had become symbolic of integrity. But privately, he felt the weight of every headline, every accusation that he'd humiliated good people for fame. The criticism came from both sides. Some activists said he was too forgiving. Others claimed he'd gone too far. Anonymous messages flooded his inbox, some praising him, others filled with venom. You ruined lives for attention. One read, another said, thank you for standing when others stay silent. He had learned that justice never comes without noise. But what hurt most were the threats. Extremist groups targeted him online, calling him divisive. Security now followed him wherever he went. He didn't complain, but Sophia noticed the toll. Sophia Alvarez had become an overnight symbol of digital activism. Her project, Equity Watch, grew from a single live stream into a national platform documenting bias in everyday interactions. Airports, hotels, restaurants, schools, within weeks. Her subscriber count hit 2 million. Yet, success didn't make her proud. It made her vigilant. She received daily threats. Her phone buzzed with reporters, and her family begged her to slow down. But she couldn't. The camera. She told Nathan once over coffee, isn't a weapon. It's a mirror. The world just doesn't like what it sees. Nathan smiled faintly. Keep holding it steady. Sophia, just remember to turn it off sometimes. 2. Behind the scenes. Delta's Reform Committee began implementing mandatory diversity training designed by Nathan's team. To the company's surprise, he invited Karen and Ryan to participate, not as employees, but as case studies. It was controversial. Many executives objected. Their liabilities. One board member said, Nathan's response was simple. They're living lessons. If we erase them, we erase the opportunity to learn. And so, reluctantly, the company agreed. A week later, in a training hall at Delta headquarters, Karen stood before an audience of 200 flight attendants. Her voice trembled as she spoke. I thought bias was something other people had. She said, but bias is in how we react when we're tired, when we're scared, when we stop seeing faces and start seeing categories. I hurt someone because I let fear make the decision for me. The room was silent. Some nodded, some looked away, but every person listened. When she finished, there was soft applause. She stepped off the stage crying, not from shame, but relief. For the first time in months, someone had clapped for her, not against her. Ryan followed her speech the next day, standing at the podium in his gray suit. His voice cracked halfway through. I was a captain for 18 years. He said, I thought I understood leadership, but I didn't. I enforced the rules without understanding the people they affected, and I realized leadership isn't control. It's courage to question your own certainty. His confession drew a longer silence, but it was a healing one. When he left the stage, A young black pilot trainee approached him quietly. "Sir," the trainee said, "thank you for saying what many won't." That took courage. For Ryan, it was the first moment of peace he'd felt since the landing. But not everyone was ready for redemption. Anti-woke groups online accused Nathan of destroying two innocent workers. They posted doctored videos, spreading false narratives. Protesters even gathered outside his Atlanta office, waving signs that read, "Stop the witch hunt." Nathan ignored the noise, but his security detail doubled. Sophia stood beside him through every public appearance, unshaken. "They'll call it political," she said once, "until it happens to them." Late one evening, Nathan sat alone in his office, looking out at the city lights. He replayed the footage of the flight. Karen's face, Ryan's denial, Sophia's bravery, his own measured tone. It no longer felt like anger. It felt like purpose. He whispered to himself, "If one conversation can change a system, then it's worth every scar." That same night, Karen sat at her small kitchen table helping Lucas with homework over a video call. "Mom," he asked softly, "are people still mad at you?" She swallowed hard. "Some are," she admitted. "But I'm trying to make it right." The boy smiled. "I know you will." She wiped a tear. It was the first time she'd believed it might be true. Ryan, meanwhile, had begun volunteering at a youth aviation program, teaching young pilots about ethics and empathy in flight. His license was still suspended, but his purpose had shifted. Maybe. He told the students one day, "The sky isn't where we prove ourselves. Maybe it's where we learn who we are." In the weeks that followed, Delta's public image began to recover. Slowly but surely, lawsuits decreased, complaint rates dropped, and employee morale rose. But Nathan knew this wasn't victory. It was maintenance. Justice wasn't a destination. It was a daily audit of conscience. As he prepared for his upcoming CNN interview, Sophia asked him, "Do you think people really change?" Nathan smiled faintly. "People don't change overnight," he said. "But when truth costs enough, they start to pay attention." Outside, the city glowed with quiet energy. A world once indifferent now stirred with reflection. The cost of bias had been high, careers lost, lives upended, reputations shattered. But in its place grew something far rarer, awareness. And sometimes, that awareness, however painful, is the very price that buys the first step toward equality. 4 months later, the skies looked the same, but something beneath them had changed. The anger had cooled, the headlines had faded. Yet the lesson from Flight 1923 still lingered in boardrooms, classrooms, and hearts across the country. Delta's new systems were in place: AI cabin monitoring, crew body cameras, and live reporting channels, and for the first time, accountability wasn't a slogan. Complaints had fallen by nearly 90%. But Nathan Carter didn't measure success in numbers. To him, change was about how people treated each other when no one was filming. That morning, Nathan stood before a group of new flight attendants at the Delta Training Center in Atlanta. The recruits listened closely as he spoke with quiet conviction. "Policy means nothing if empathy isn't behind it," he said. "Every seat you walk past has a story. Treat every passenger like someone's family, because they are." The room broke into applause. Behind him, the Fair Skies Initiative logo glowed softly on the screen, a symbol of what courage could build after chaos. Karen Mitchell sat in the back of that same room, unannounced, watching in silence. Her life had changed completely. The uniform she once wore with pride was gone. But she'd built something else in its place. She now traveled to schools, churches, and local organizations, speaking about unconscious bias and the dangers of silent judgment. Some audiences welcomed her, others did not. But she kept showing up. After one event, a woman approached her in tears and said, You made me realize I've been part of the problem. Thank you for saying what most people won't." Karen smiled softly, realizing that redemption wasn't a headline, it was a daily choice across the country. Ryan Sullivan's story had taken a quieter turn. His pilot license was reinstated under strict supervision, but he no longer flew passengers. Instead, he trained new pilots, teaching them not only flight procedures but human awareness. Flying isn't just about the sky. He told his trainees, it's about who you become when the rules don't tell you what's right. His voice no longer carried authority. It carried humility. Each lesson felt like a step towards something purer than reputation, integrity. Sofia Alvarez had become a force of her own. Her project, Equity Watch, had grown into a national platform, training young journalists to document acts of bias and injustice wherever they appeared. She spent her days traveling, filming, and meeting with civil rights groups, always reminding her viewers, the camera is not for punishment, it's for proof. Her courage had turned her from an influencer into a voice of conscience for a generation that refused to look away. Nathan often told her she had done something rare, turned outrage into education. Yet not all responses were kind. Nathan still received threats from extremists who blamed him for dividing people. He refused to back down. Truth doesn't destroy unity. He told a journalist, it exposes the kind that was never real. Despite the hostility, he carried on with his work, attending hearings, leading diversity councils, and helping rewrite federal airline guidelines. The Fair Skies initiative became a model across industries, from hospitality to law enforcement. One afternoon, Nathan received a letter from a woman named Sarah Johnson, a passenger from seat 2A on that unforgettable flight. Her words were simple. I didn't speak that day, and I regret it, but because of you. I learned that silence is also a choice. Last week, I stood up for a coworker who was being mistreated. Thank you for reminding me that respect isn't given. It's practiced. Nathan read it twice, then folded it carefully into his jacket pocket. No board meeting or policy could ever mean more than that letter. Weeks later, Delta hosted a small public event to celebrate the full implementation of the Fair Skies program. It wasn't glamorous, just honest. Employees, passengers, and families gathered under a banner that read, "One flight changed the skies." Karen was there, seated beside Sofia, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Ryan stood a few rows behind, wearing his training badge instead of a captain's pin, when Nathan walked on stage. The crowd rose to its feet. He waited for them to quiet before speaking. I never wanted to be a symbol. He began. I just wanted to know if fairness still had wings. What happened that day was painful for everyone, but it forced us to see ourselves without excuses. Change doesn't come from anger. It comes from courage, from the willingness to confront what's wrong and keep walking forward. His voice softened. If one man standing for his seat could lead to all this, imagine what happens when we all stand together. Applause filled the hall. Karen wiped her eyes. Ryan bowed his head. Sofia raised her camera but lowered it again, choosing to simply watch. Nathan stepped down from the stage, shaking hands, smiling humbly. For a brief moment, he felt something he hadn't felt since that flight. Peace. As the sun set over the Atlanta skyline, a message played on the lobby screen showing passengers boarding flights with smiles and open hands. The words beneath read, "Change takes off when courage lands." Nathan paused to look at it before walking toward the exit. The world hadn't become perfect. Bias still existed. Fear still lingered, and ignorance still found its voice. But something else had begun too. Awareness, compassion, and a shared belief that dignity should never need permission. Justice had taken flight that day, and though its journey would never truly end, Nathan knew this much to be true. The sky would never look the same again. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe for more. Change starts with awareness, and with you.